Very good. Good morning. I'm so glad to see you all here. It's chilly outside, but the sunshine, I'm sure several of you think maybe I'll just stay home. So thank you so much for coming in. Thank you very much for the folks that are here on Zoom. For anyone that's new to HGP, I want to sincerely welcome you and hope you enjoy the meeting today. Hope you all enjoy the meeting today. It's one I'm really looking forward to. HGP believes strongly in freedom of speech, but the views expressed by myself, today's reader, our speaker, HGP members, and our guests at today's meeting are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. Our meeting today will be recorded and available to the general public. It's a discussion on arguing with creationists, and so I'm so glad that Jon was willing to have this available to the general public. You're here at a Humanists of Greater Portland meeting, and a simple definition, which can be found on our website, is humanism is a philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. It's a way of life that guides us to live an ethical life without relying on the supernatural or concern for life beyond our death. Humanism promotes ethical principles and social compassion to enhance the quality of life and to contribute to the well-being of society and the health of the planet that we share with all living creatures. It's quite a creed. It's difficult to live by, but wonderful to aspire to. Jon Daggett is our reader today. Jon, could you please come forward? Oh, you're here. I look up. Oh, you are prepared. Yeah, you're all there. Thank you so much. I was wondering why is Jon standing there? Even though it's funny. I don't know your last name, but now I do. Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
A couple of months ago, I read the introduction to a book by a physicist whose theory was that we're quantum particles floating in the universe, and for a while we're housed in a body that deteriorates and goes away, but we never die, and that's kind of an interesting theory. Well, recently someone sent me a poem, an actual poem, and I think this guy believes this, so I hope you enjoy this poem. It's by James McCree, and he says, "This is Instructions Before Visiting Planet Earth." That's the title of the poem. "In the event that you wake up and find your soul separated from source and manifest into material form, don't panic. Your condition is only temporary. You have been selected for the opportunity of human incarnation. This 3D simulation is designed to break up the monotony of eternity by giving you a fully immersed experience as the distinct ego identity. Your body will serve as your physical avatar as you navigate a dense and dramatic reality. There will be many distractions causing you to forget your true nature and origin. You will experience a range of emotions from joy to loneliness to despair. But remember, no matter what trials and traumas you encounter, your soul remains perfectly intact and safe. At times you may feel lost or afraid. This is totally normal. If you need guidance, simply slow down your busy mind and bring your awareness to the quiet place inside yourself. On this planet, nothing is permanent. People and things come and go. You will fall in love, form sentimental attachments, only to lose everything you hold dear. So cling to nothing too tightly, even yourself. When it's time to let go with grace, for nothing is owned, only borrowed. As you walk among the people on the planet, try to be a good guest, tread lightly. Remember that you are only visiting. Don't make a mess. Listen more than you speak. Give more than you take. Don't keep your soft heart locked in a glass cage protected from wear and tear. You'll never make it out alive, and time passes rather quickly. So come back with some battle scars and good stories to tell.
Lovely advice, Jon. Thank you. That was good. we have a return. Most of you know Dr. Jon Peters. He's presented here several times before, and we always enjoy his presentations. Dr. Peters has spent 50 years debating creationists. As a retired biology professor and physician, he has been very interested in promoting science and accurate history. An evangelical for a few years in his teens, his education in biology, including graduate work, exposed Dr. Peters to both sides of the debate and the religious foundations of fundamentalist creationist objections. Even in today's political climate of Christian nationalism, many of the issues are grounded in the science battles with creationists. Thank you, Jon, for doing this. Much, much appreciated. Yeah.
Thank you very much for just allowing me to be here. And I am being paid in terms of my emotional help and promoting science and fighting against the pseudoscience that's out there. So, yeah, thank you. So most of us have a creationist in our family. So what happens when, Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up, maybe you're in a work meeting, etc., and this person just loves to present why science is wrong and evolution is evil and stuff like that. So my point of the presentation today is, what do you do? Do you decide to involve yourself in a dialogue? What is that going to look like? And will you completely blow up whatever situation you're in? So let's see. Okay, so the question is, do you engage? And then you should realize that they're probably going to want to proselytize for their particular faith. I have debated some Muslims, I don't think any Hindus, but in our country, it's the evangelicals and the fundamentalists that are really, really driving Christian nationalism and a lot of things. And this goes back especially to the 1950s and 60s. So they're going to proselytize. They're going to tell you that evolution is immortal, evil, it's only a theory. It's going to tell you why evolution is atheistic. And then when you tell them about the 1.4 billion Catholics that can go along with it, and Francis Collins and Biologos and evangelical Maine people, they will just move on to the next thing. They're going to share with you their excitement over all this anti-evolution information that they found. And they're going to prove to you soon, as you begin your discussion on evolution, that since the origin of life is impossible, that discounts evolution, not realizing that evolution is the origin of species and abiogenesis is the origin of life. And they will probably never figure that out. Even when you say to them, choose any solution to the origin of life you want. God, aliens, supercomputer, all natural, your great-great-grandmother with her time machine that goes back into time and seeds the earth. It doesn't matter. None of that touches the overwhelming evidence for evolution. And then be ready to circle back on that in about, a half an hour or so, because it won't stick. Okay, so what's going to happen is that they're probably not going to understand basic science. So they won't understand the difference between the fact of evolution and the theory of evolution. Evolution is a fact. It's been defined since the 1940s as a change in allele frequency or genes in a population through time. We see that every day in the hospital with antibiotic resistance. We see it every day in the field. We see it every day in the lab. The theory of evolution is how and why that occurs. And that does change a little bit, gets modified. When you look at gravity, for example, there's gravity, which is a fact. If you don't believe that, you can jump off a 10-story building. But the theory of gravity changes, right? I mean, Einstein replaced Newton's with a little bit better and more refinement, but gravity didn't go away. So the same thing with evolution. The theory of evolution, there are people, including Daniel Dennett and others, who have decided that the theory of evolution is actually the greatest discovery in the history of mankind because it affects so much, even more than fire and other things. All right, and so the other thing you'll end up doing probably is trying to defend the fact that evolution is not atheistic. And again, we got 1.4 billion Catholics. We've got evangelicals like Francis Collins and Dennis Venema. And just so it is something that you have to be prepared that will be something that will diverge from your topic, which is evolution, into all these side topics. And then they have no idea the problems in their creationism. I can show you at the end here, if you want, some new DNA discoveries that basically end anti-evolution. I'm so excited after 50 years. I've been looking for something that is preclusionary, that just stops it cold. It doesn't matter anymore what you believe, it's over. It's 1633, it's your Galileo moment, and even though it took them 400 years to admit that they were wrong officially, we have the DNA evidence now. But they will continue to defend if they're young Earth creationists, their flood narrative, even though you ask them using your Socratic method, which we're going to talk about, like, really, well, how did the pterodactyls not get to the top? Or, there's these huge ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, reptiles that supposedly, in your view, were existing at the same time as 200 fossil whale species, but the reptiles are always below the fossil whales. So how is it that the flood completely sorted those out really nicely, even though that these large reptiles have the same mass and body shape in many cases as whales? Anyway, as you begin to ask that, those are things that they haven't even thought about. You'll also get that evolution is a religion, it's a worldview, and you can again say, well, that's strange, since atheists, agnostics, Hindus, Muslims, and 1.4 billion Catholics can agree to it, and they all have different worldviews, so how can it be a unifying worldview? And then you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. There's a little thing there where somebody tried to show that, so that will come out all the time. We already talked about evolution as a fact as defined in science and medicine, by the way. Maybe we'll have time in the questions to talk about that. I was shocked when I went to medical school because I had gone through graduate school and a biologist, and the biochemist in our department, which was at the time I went, it was the 15th ranked medical school in the nation. They were more prone and positive for evolution than my evolutionary professors were in the graduate program. It just kind of blew me away. But now I know why, so we can talk about that. And so the problem with creationism, as you know, is that it's usually a package deal. They are usually also denial in terms of climate change. They're often deniers in terms of vaccine use. They're often MAGA people. And then this all rolls up into Christian nationalism. So the fact that creationism does have an impact on a lot of our lives, even though you may not know it. Okay, so again, why care? Because creationism is actually anti-science. It's not just biology and evolution. It affects a lot of different things. There is one creationism that is left standing, and we can talk about that. It's called theistic evolution, which is what the Catholics and Francis Collins and Biologos goes for, but that has horrendous problems that everyone kind of doesn't talk about. Even the scientists are so happy to get a theistic evolutionist because they finally stop attacking science. God used evolution or allowed it to create species. But when you ask them the problem for that, and it's a mortal problem, the scientists go silent, and so do the Catholics, because no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room, which is a real big problem for theistic evolution. Okay, it harms critical thinking and skepticism, because with creationism, you just say it's in the Bible or it's in the Quran. I don't have to think anymore. It's an off-the-shelf answer, and it completely removes critical thinking and what it means to be a skeptic. Separation of church and state, oh my gosh. That's right. When they run for school boards, they want to impose their Bible beliefs into science. They want to tear down science. There are two great questions in life. A lot of people don't, when it comes to origins, the fundamentalists will say, it doesn't matter. All that matters is Jesus died for our sins and that we believe that he rose again, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff about Genesis and origins doesn't matter. And then the biologists on the other side are also doing the same thing. We have so many things to teach, and you're not going to convince them, let's not deal with origins. And so a lot of people don't think that origins are that important. And so I ran into this very short, I think it's like 30 seconds by Salman Rushdie. My voice decided to be raspy for this morning. And I think this is going to work. And so he says there are two great questions in life. The first one he says, where do we come from? And I would like to revise it and say, why are we here? It's the great question that theologians, philosophers, everybody has been debating for thousands of years. And then along comes this little puny thing called science. And it goes, well, actually, we do know why we're here in one way. We evolved. We came on the scene 300,000 years ago. We know exactly from where, why, when we got here, and what we're doing. So that, in some ways, has been already answered. And people don't like the answer, but anyway. And then once you answer that, why are we here? Then the next question is, how then should we live our life? And so let's see if this works. Hopefully it will.
And in my view, one thing we know about all religions on the first question is that they're all wrong. That's not where we came from. Maybe beautiful stories, Genesis is a beautiful story. The Hindu creation myth of Shiva churning the universe into being in a giant pot, is a perfectly beautiful story. The Nordic creation myth, with the cow at the bottom of the Gnunga gap, all that's a beautiful story. There's nothing wrong with them as stories. They're excellent stories, but they're not true. They're fictions. And as far as the ethical question is concerned, frankly, I don't want to be told what to think by a priest. I think wherever you've had religion in charge of the ethical question, you get inquisitions, you get ayatollahs, you get oppression. So from my point of view, I don't look to religion to answer the two great questions of life.
All right. Let's see. Whoops. Go back. Okay. I think I've got all the buttons pushed. All right. So, and I agree with him. It's ironic to me that I spent my entire careers in science and medicine, and then there is this incredible existential question lying out there that people have been trying to get at for thousands of years. And in one way, science has answered it. And so what makes us human, why we are here, if there's purpose and meaning in life, etc., those actually can be informed by science. Modern medicine is based on evolution. We mentioned antibiotic resistance, a lot of other things, but I found out in some research that there are some actually Christians, evangelicals such as Joshua Swamidass and Francis Collins, who work in obviously hospitals in the field, but you can't understand cancer research without evolution, because that cell starts as a normal cell, it has mutations and becomes rogue, it becomes immortal, so it won't die like the rest of the cells. When they get defective, the body gets rid of them and they destroy them, or they destroy themselves. But a cancer cell becomes immortal, and then it starts developing new mutations that were never there before, so that it can spread, so that it can evade the immune system, so that it can form blood vessels to get the nutrients in. It literally becomes kind of a new organism, and it models exactly the way evolution works in terms of random mutations being selected by natural selection and genetics. And so you can't study and research cancer without evolution. It is evolution. So that was kind of a surprise to me, but it was pleasant. And then we'll circle back, I think, at the end, if anybody has an interest, why I think even theistic evolution fails. The solution that a lot of religions and scientists are willing to accommodate with religion, I think it fails also, and we can talk about that. I think that creationism harms children. You're indoctrinating kids to accept mythology as reality instead of solving problems. And then, of course, we know what happens when you get creationism into the government, schools, etc. And we're seeing that especially with Christian nationalism today. Okay, so this is what should you know. If you're going to do the Picard engage, then you've got to realize that evidence will not work for you. You will bring forth incredible evidence to show them that actually their views are right or their views are wrong. And the next frustrating thing for you, no matter how you've presented this evidence so that they can understand it, they won't look at it. They don't have time. They won't click on anything you put, but they will give you all kinds of YouTubes and everything that you're supposed to look at. So that is the main thing that you're going to run into if you can get around that. So let me, I don't know if you can, everybody at home or wherever you are, can read these two quotes, but I'd like to do that for you right now real quick. And this is by Leon Fessinger, who was studying UFO devotees, right? You remember they would all sell everything they own, go to a certain place and wait for the UFO, and then it wouldn't show up. Did they give up their mythology and their myths? No, they rationalized it and got another date for it. Okay, so he says here, quote, "A man with a conviction is hard to change. Tell him you disagree and he turns away. Show him facts for figures and he questions your sources. Appeal to logic and he fails to see your point." And then the very famous George Lakoff in his book said some of the same things. Let me read that also. "One of the things cognitive science teaches us is that when people define their very identity by a worldview or a narrative or a mode of thought, they are unlikely to change for the simple reason that it is physically part of their brain, and so many other aspects of their brain structure would also have to change. That change is highly unlikely." So this is called identity fusion. It's you come to some beliefs, whether you just came to them by yourself or somebody presented some sacred scriptures to you that has answers, and you adopt those and you've got to believe those. You raise those beliefs to sacred values, and then they get merged with your identity. It is in your bone marrow. Anybody who attempts to show you that certain beliefs that you have are wrong actually in the brain feels like an attack. And they will, just like if you were being attacked by a bear or somebody wielding a knife or something like that, you will go to the best you can to protect yourself. And this is what happens with identity fusion. You are butting up against someone who can't be wrong. Many times their entire life would basically end. Their meaning, their purpose, their friends, their community, their social connections, everything is on the line with, in the United States, a literal interpretation of Genesis. The world has to be 6,000 years old. There has to be a Tower of Babel. There has to be an ark. There has to be a global flood. Everything has to fit into that. The sun, they will rationalize how the sun can stand still for a day, which means that the earth stopped spinning at 1,000 miles per hour suddenly, and there were no earthquakes, tsunamis, and the people in South America and the Mayans and the Aztecs didn't notice a day of darkness. And so, but they will defend this, and they're very good at rationalizing. Okay, so when would you want to dive in? Is it possible that after all of this, you still want to take on this tiger that's going to maul your intellectual ability to try and be rational? So if they're actually curious, if somebody comes up to you and says, I don't understand this new DNA stuff, or what is your best example of evolution? And they're really kind of confused and they want to be educated, go for it. That is never going to happen. They're going to come in, they've got stuff to show you, and that damned evolution, as the British pronounce it to us, that's not going to happen. But if it does, sit down, take a deep breath, and say, well, actually, let me tell you why the science has it right. Or if you're like me, I just cannot not defend, that's a double negative, science. And so I just can't help myself. If you're also interested in just science education, you've got some knowledge and you want to maybe just help out with science education. I have actually given presentations at some of the local high schools on whale evolution because it is so incredibly well documented and it's visual. You can actually see things happening. If if they're not the only person in the room, if they've got kids next to them, or when I'm debating online, which I know I'm not going to change the person I'm debating with, but there's other people. Some of these groups have 5 and 10,000 subscribers in it, and so you're kind of educating some other people indirectly. You might want to think about that. If they're willing to honestly debate, if you present something, yeah, good luck with that. If they're a leader, if they're a seminary professor, if they teach young people, then I usually go after them because they are dragging other people down the wrong paths and mythology and stuff. Okay, so here's a quote. Again, I'll read this from Paul Brown. He was a Republican out of Georgia. He's an MD, medical doctor, in 2012, and he said, quote, "All that stuff I was taught about evolution and embryology and the Big Bang theory," he's already crossed over into the origin of life and and the origin of the universe has nothing to do with the evidence for the evolution. Anyway, all that is lies straight from the pit of hell. You see, there are a lot of scientific data that I found out as a scientist that actually show that this is really a young Earth. I believe it. The Earth was created in 6 days as we know them. That is what the Bible says. So, them's fighting words for me. Oh yes, don't talk to any of my family or friends about how I waste my life with creationists. Okay, so what would cause you to pause? If you've got somebody who's really fragile, I mean, this is really their interpretation of reality, creationism, is what they center their life around. Maybe they're older, whatever it is. If you look at that and you say, even if I could do something to disabuse them of their mythology and science, what is the point of doing that? And so I think you should stop and look at fragility issues, compassion. And then the other thing is, if you've got somebody all the way from young Earth creationism to old Earth creationism to theistic evolution, should you just stop there? At least they're finally not attacking science anymore. Shut up, Peters. Leave it alone. And there's lots of scientists that think that. Nathan Lenz has a wonderful book and podcast out and stuff. And that's what he's doing. He's kind of touching the no-no area. I think he could get burned a little bit. So I understand that. Pragmatically, I have no problem with someone saying, look, they're a theistic evolutionist, he's pro-science, he's giving money to grants and whatever, let's just be quiet. In fact, my view that theistic evolution doesn't work either is kind of a minority view, I think. But I'm right. No. Okay. All right. So what are some general suggestions you can have when you decide to engage, you decide to ignore everything I just told you that you shouldn't, and you decide, I'm stepping into the pit here. There are a few things that I've read by people who know the psychology of debating that say that might help. Yeah. And so the first thing is to try and find some common ground. Just anything that you can find that shows that you're a little bit respectful for them. Be calm. I say be surgical. I remember I was assisting in a surgery, and this surgeon who was very good, very calm, he was taking down a lot of scar tissue, which has a lot of blood vessels in it, and it's just a mess. And he hit an artery, and the blood was kind of going up. And, all of us, the scrub nurse, me, and everyone else in the room was going, oh, crap. He was just calm as be, just got, suture out, just kind of closed it off and stuff like that. And that's what you need to be too. So no matter how emotional they get or whatever, just say, well, that's interesting, but let me show you this other thing. And so no ad hominems, don't try and not do personal attacks, at least for the first 45 minutes. And then it might get a little bit better. Okay. And very, very important, use the Socratic method. So just say, well, why do you believe that? Or what's your evidence that that's true? And just kind of just be, as you slice them up with your Socratic knife, that's the best way to go. You may need to repeat back to them what you understood. So you really believe that those pterodactyls couldn't fly to the top in the flood. They're always found on one layer. Okay. Stay on topic. Drill down before moving on. Oh, this happens all the time. So as you show them the ridiculous nature of their beliefs, they will go, well, what about this then? Or explain this, you know, and I go, well, science doesn't know everything. What do you think keeps scientists employed, you know? So, but they will move away from the topic that's being discussed very quickly. You've got to bring them back. Let's not go to another topic yet. Let's continue to really drill down on what this means if your claim is true. Admit when you're wrong and thank them. That hasn't happened to me very often, but, well, not because I'm smart, just because I've spent 50 years researching it. But I had a quote once out that was a very important quote, and somebody said that that's not exactly right. And so he went into, there's something on the internet where you can actually go into old books and get the page out and show it. Anyway, not only was my quote wrong, but the context said the exact opposite. I mean, it was like, oh God, I was so embarrassed. Anyway, so I had to go back into my website and change that. And then here's a very important thing. We tend to put creationists all into one umbrella, especially all creationists are young earth creationists because they have this incredible propaganda mill. I mean, if you want to get something on Google that is not a young earth creationist, you have to go like the third page almost to get it. So we're going to talk about that. You may not know that there are 6 types of creationists. And so when you start talking with the creationists, you could assume that 90% of the time you're going to be talking with a young earth creationist, but don't make the mistake. I saw one person was just arguing against young earth creationists like for 5 minutes, and then he realized that the person was not a young earth creationist. And so the first thing you should do is find out what type of creationists they are. And then technically, the purpose of debates is to find truth so that both of you end up agreeing on something. It's not to win. That may be your agenda, but that's not their agenda. Their agenda is to not only win, but completely destroy the evil evolution. Okay, so here's your type of creationists. First of all, there's day age. There's a verse in the Bible that says that a day to the Lord is worth 1,000 years, or vice versa. And so the first 2 came about in the 1800s as people realized that the earth was very old. And so they use that. And then there's the gap creationism, where supposedly there's billions of years between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Both of those are really not used anymore because they were attempts to accommodate geology. And then Darwin came along, and so that's not really important anymore. There's also a figurative metaphor way of looking at Genesis, that they're just ways of teaching us about God and things like that. Never mind that the flood was basically genocide, and they never think about all the babies and young children that died, you know. So anyway, but that's a very common way, especially with Catholicism, to look at Genesis as metaphor. Now, there's also young earth creationism, this is the one where they're the most enthusiastic, and your chances of getting a young earth creationist is probably greater than 90%. There's also progressive creationism. I don't know if you've heard of Reasons to Believe, which was founded by Hugh Ross, who's an astronomer or physicist, and he says, absolutely the earth is old. But he doesn't believe in human evolution or evolution. And so progressive creationism, which goes back to Cuvier in the 1800s, as they began finding these fossils in different layers, there was simple to complex, no mixing, and so they had to figure out what to do with this. And so they basically came up with the fact that each layer is an extinction, and God started over. So God got rid of the old species and then created new ones. And so that's what progressive creationism is. Of course, transitional fossils kind of ruin that, but they will argue that there are no transitional fossils and that there is no evidence for human evolution. And then there's 2 types of theistic evolution. There's the Catholic method, which God used or allowed evolution to create species, but he tinkered with it. When there needed to be a mutation, boom, the right one could, it was guided, it had goals, it had purpose. And then there's the other theistic evolution, which is championed by Biologos. I don't know if anybody's heard of Francis Collin Biologos. He established a website called Biologos in 2007 with a Templeton grant. And by the way, he's a very famous medical researcher. He was the head of the NIH under several presidents, and he also was the director of the Human Genome Project. This guy knows his stuff. He knows evolution is true, and he completely accepts the current understanding, random mutations, mass extinctions, and the fact that natural selection and other mechanisms like genetic drift or neutral theory drove evolution. It's completely naturalistic. It's just God used it. Okay, we can talk about why, in my mind, that doesn't work. But anyway, and then the other thing is that you'll often find somebody who has their own creationism. They've taken different parts and they have just a mishmash of creationism that has fallen on the floor and broken into a bunch of pieces, and that can be difficult to figure out how to approach that. Okay, so there's a couple of they're not creationisms, well, kind of, I guess they are. They're approaches to the origin of species that even agnostics and atheists are prone to because they're intuitive. And the first one is intelligent design. So you look at the complexity of life and humans, and it's even more than you know. They recently did a biopsy of the cerebellum in a brain, which I assume the person was dead, in the back, and they found in 1 cubic millimeter, which is like the point of your Bic pen, 1.4 million synapses. Those are connections between. Can you imagine what the brain must be like? And so I think it could be that the human brain could be the most complex thing in the universe. And of course we haven't figured out completely what consciousness is. They're working on it, but you can understand. So when you look at the complexity of life, of the universe and stuff like that, it is so easy to say, there must be a design behind it. There must be something that created all this, because it intuitively doesn't seem like it could have occurred naturally. And so Steven Pinker, very famous at Harvard, he said, quotes, "It's natural to think that living things must be the handiwork of a designer, but it is also natural to think that the sun went around the earth, and overcoming naive impressions to figure out how things really work is one of humanity's highest callings. And it's also extremely tough. You have to educate yourself. You have to push back against what is intuitive." I mean, if I walk, I guess this will work. If I walk across the room, how fast am I moving? 2 miles an hour, something like that? No, I'm spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator right now, and I'm going around the Earth at 67,000 miles per hour. That's not intuitive. Of course the theologians in the 1500s, 1600s felt that the Earth was flat, the sun went around us, and it didn't move. They weren't stupid, they were just using what they figured at the time. It takes a lot of work to figure out that what your intuitive feelings are not true. Okay, and then everyone knows who Douglas Adams was, famous. So this is what he wrote in terms of how intelligent design gets things backwards. Imagine a puddle waking up one morning and thinking, this is an interesting world I find myself in, an interesting hole I find myself in. It fits me rather well, doesn't it? In fact, it fits me staggeringly well, this hole that I find myself in. It must have been made just to have me in it. So, does everyone know who Dan Barker of FFRF is? He just wrote a book and he coined a new term called contradiction. And what he has found in his debates is that the creationists and a lot of people will flip things around 180 degrees. So the rooster brings the sun up by crowing. When you look at the borders of states, they were specifically made because of the rivers there, or were the rivers made because the line was made first? And so what you're dealing with a lot of this is that intelligent design, they're cherry picking. They have no idea that when you look at humans, there's this crazy recurrent laryngeal nerve we have that can only be explained rationally by evolution. We have 3 pseudogenes for making egg yolk, used for laying eggs. We make an empty yolk sac in the fetal position that then goes away. 3,000 men, American men, every year have breast cancer. The vertebrate eye works really good only after evolution fixed it about 6 times. So they are ignorant either by choice or just the way they are. They're cherry picking the incredible complexity of life and assuming that it had to be designed. And so, and again, this is not just creationism, but you'll run into a lot of people that, well, I think things look like it's intelligent design because it's complex. The other thing that you'll run into besides intelligent design is you'll run into the fine-tuning argument. That is, in the 60s, physicists especially started to discover that there's all these constants, gravity, speed of light, etc. And if you tweak just one of them, our universe goes away. It completely doesn't work. And so this is one of the more suggestive for an intelligent designer, or something, a creator behind that. But in the last 50 years or so, they've been studying it more, and it turns out if you let more than one change at a time, that the universe does pretty good. So they were kind of cherry picking that you can only change one of these constants. And the other thing is, they say, well, it looks like the universe is designed. And then you ask, designed for what? And they will say, well, for life, because we're here. Well, that's not true either, because if you go out in the universe, every place that you go just about kills it. The average density of the universe is only 6 protons per cubic meter. It's just, it will kill life just about everywhere except for these Goldilocks rare areas. So it's not designed for life, it's designed for death, or as one physicist said, it's designed to make black holes. Okay. Anyway, and the other thing is, these parameters, these constants were set at the Big Bang, it looks like. And so if you're going to say that they can't change, then are you not saying that God is constrained? He can't change those? Problem theologically. Okay, so there's also the newest idea about the universe, as far as I understand it, is that the Big Bang was not the start of the universe. There was inflation before the universe blew up. And so where inflation came from, nobody knows, and so we just kicking the problem down the street. But there was no singularity. There was no point of maximum density and mass and energy that it blew up. And then, of course, there's the multiverse idea that if there are millions of universes, then ours is not that special. We just happen to have a certain of those constraints. And by the way, the multiverse is not hypothesis because you can't test it, and it's not really a scientific theory, but it does fall out of the equations for inflation. And inflation has withheld a lot of testing, as far as I can tell. And so if inflation is right, then the multiverse is actually one physicist, cosmologist, said the multiverse is inevitable because the equations are that strong to support it. It's just that, how do you test it? And so until they figure out a way to test it, it's an idea, it's a prediction, but it's not a hypothesis or even a scientific theory. Okay, so I'm just about done here. There's some nice quotes that I really enjoy. Stephen Hawking made a quote: "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge." And Dr. Crotto said that there's more evidence for evolution than any other truth we have discovered. And the attack on evolution is not just an attack on Darwin, it's an attack on the whole of the sciences because the evidence comes from all of those sciences. Think about geology, paleontology, biogeography. How do you get all those animals and plants to Hawaii? How did the sloth get from the Mount Ararat to South Africa? Very slowly, I suppose. So it affects medicine. It affects all of these disciplines. If evolution is wrong, everything's wrong. And then Francis Collins, when we mentioned him, quote, he says, "The evidence supporting the idea that all living things are descended from a common ancestor is truly overwhelming. I would not necessarily wish that it be so, but as a Bible-believing Christian, it is. It does not serve faith well to try and deny that." And then Daniel Dennett, my hero for saying this because he's a philosopher, he said, "Let me lay my cards on the table. If I were to give an award for the single best idea anyone ever had, I'd give it to Darwin, ahead of even Newton or Einstein and everyone else. In a single stroke, the idea of evolution by natural selection unifies the realm of life and purpose with the realm of space and time, cause and effect, mechanism, and physical law. It is not just a wonderful idea, it is a dangerous idea to a lot of people." Okay, now, plug for me here as I end up. I have taken 50 years of debating people who want to destroy evolution and put it into a website. I think I now have 85% of the answers that you could ever run into. And so this thing started out a couple years ago as a simple website. Now it's like an encyclopedia. The one on the left is called truthfulorigins.info. There's a search engine. There's, I mean, literally just about everything that could ever come up in a discussion with a creationist is in there. I also believe that religion is wrong in terms of its truth claims, and so the other half of that is my views on Christianity and religions and how they are morally and specifically wrong. The one on the right is the second one that is a duplicate of the one on the left, but I scrubbed the religion out of it. So if you have someone that you don't want to bring up the religion issues, you just want to talk about evolution, that's on that side there. And probably 90% of it is not mine. I've researched it. I'm more like a librarian who's got together and put the answers to all your questions in one. And I'm not that smart. I probably have an IQ just above normal. I just am so like a bulldog. I just will not give up why things are the way they are. And so I have to rely on a lot of smart people that I found that's in the quotes. And there's also a couple things in there. My views on theistic evolution are, I think, my own. I believe that if God used or created, if God used or allowed evolution to create species, in the end, it makes this God incompetent, indifferent, or malevolent. And I think I can show that. But a lot of people don't want to go there. So the other thing I did with this is that I'm so tired of going down these creationist rabbit holes and pseudoscience that I sat back and said, okay, after 50 years, do I have just 2 examples of evolution that they will not get around? And that's what this is. These websites are, those 2 are whale evolution. Once you look at all the evidence, it's just overwhelming that anyone could deny it. By the way, they don't deny it, they go to mechanisms. Well, how could that have occurred in only 10 million years? Well, actually, nature really doesn't care whether we know how it occurred or not. That's their way of getting around the evidence. And then the other thing that hopefully we can maybe touch upon a little bit is this newer DNA evidence is unbelievable for human evolution and macroevolution, what we found. And I'm going around, I'm a preacher, and Johnny Appleseed, and dropping into all these creationist Facebook sites that want to kill me. And I said, well, there's some new DNA evidence now that, I'm sorry, but it's your Galileo moment. It's over. You don't know it yet. But I've put this out there and debated some really smart PhD creationists on this DNA stuff, and it's holding up great. The whale evolution evidence is holding up great. I did something different with that because it's so visual and so incredible to have 200 whale species just showing Nautilus' gradual movement of the blowhole migrates up, the hind limbs shrink, the pelvis forms. I mean, it's just wonderful. I made 3 videos to show the evidence rather than just discuss it. So that's it. And there's a reason why older people should not be probably giving lectures. But anyway, so have lots of caffeine available. But I actually show it, and I show living whales, fossil whales, and the DNA evidence. There's DNA evidence now that will show that whales and hippos share an ancestor and stuff like that. It's just great stuff. So thank you very much. Evolution is true. Okay.
A lot of tips about how to just talk to people that share our different views. I think that's a great gift right now, to stay calm.
Especially during family gatherings.
Yes, and that idea of fragility. Look at who you're talking to. Someone that is, their lifeline is this idea of creation. You're not going to argue with them. It's a gift to know who to argue with. But some of those big guns that are promoting creationism to young people in positions of authority, those are the ones that you take on and do it well. Thank you so much for your good work and for sharing that where we can go for more information. Much, much appreciated. Yep. Well, I'd like to open things up for questions right now, and thank you for your condensing your presentation so we have lots of time for questions, because our gang, as you know, loves to ask questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. You know and you'll get a number. We have 5 people already. And then if you're on Zoom and you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and type your name in or type your question. Okay, how about questioner number 1? Go ahead. Yeah.
Can you really change creationists? Or is this something innate in their human setup? Do you really find people who were creationists and who actually just decided that they can change? Or is this possible? And that's all the question is.
So the question is, do creationists actually change when you're discussing? And I think... No, no. My experience has been that way. Yes, there are. I will say that there's kind of a cutoff. If you've got a 50-year-old white male who's an evangelical, I mean, yeah, it's like buying a lottery ticket. Which is why I said that sometimes you may decide not to even start an engagement unless there's other people around that would be educated that might be willing. But unfortunately. I don't even know, I've been doing this for so long, if I can even name 4 or 5 in 50 years. I will tell you though, here's a true story. So a couple days ago I was debating a creationist, and he made the logical fallacy mistake of, well, prove God is wrong, which of course you can't prove a negative. So I said, well, prove unicorns don't exist.
Oh.
He showed me his creationist, because the unicorns are mentioned in the Bible, okay. So he showed me proof of unicorns. Which I wasn't expecting. That wasn't the point. So he had this skull with a horn coming out of it, and he had a couple other things. And so I used Google reverse image. I made a copy, put in a reverse image, and it brought me to the author who fashioned this thing as artwork. And then the other one was, I can't remember what it was. It was just a fabricated stuff. And I showed him, no, unicorns don't exist. This is, and he disappeared. He wasn't willing to talk about anything more. So maybe that was a crack, that his sources are not reliable. They're lying to him, and so he's gone. So I don't know what happened, but usually that won't happen. They will just dig in and say, "Oh no, you're wrong," blah blah blah. So I wasn't expecting that. I thought I had chosen something that would prove my point, but it didn't. So so occasionally, yeah, you do. They disappear or they go, "Oh, that's interesting," but that's almost never happens. They will go down to the death rung and die on that hill of whatever their creationism is. Or they may move to old earth creationism, but a lot of them will, that I've talked to, people who have made the transition to understanding evolution's true, they usually start out and they go to different stages and they kind of work their way out as it is. But if you ask the scientists and the evangelicals at BioLogos that Francis Collins, founded, and you ask them, well, what kind of impact have you had on the evangelical movements and stuff like that? And they really haven't had much impact. So anyway, that's a long answer. So.
Very good. Questioner number 2. Yeah.
I didn't know, John, that creationism has, just like every religion, has a range of approaches, a range of. But I keep imagining having a conversation with a creationist who thinks that God created everything as it is. I want to ask them, then why did God create all these bacteria and viruses that kill us? I mean, there's so many bad things here. Why did God create these things? So how would they answer that kind of question?
So the question is, if God created everything, what about the bacteria and these diseases and stuff like that? And the young earth creationist is the fall. So everything was perfect, and then Adam and Eve sinned, and then everything kind of degraded from there. And then you ask them, well, where did the complexity come from? And they will come up with, well, it's a de-evolution. They changed through some various processes. And then my go-to is usually malaria. So if you're going to tell us that life is so complex that it couldn't have evolved, and then you look at malaria, Plasmodium is an extremely complex organism, and you should look at its life cycle. It goes through all sorts of different intermediates and stuff like that. And I said, well, okay, if you're telling me that couldn't have evolved, then who created malaria? And so that's, again, when they usually exit stage left, because they hadn't thought about that before. So, and then everything for a young earth creationist is the fall. The fall usually satisfies everything for them. But then you say, well, this new DNA evidence that they've, I think was it last year? They finally sequenced the entire genome. Many of you don't realize that in 2002 that the Prime Minister of England and the President of the United States and Francis Collins got up there, and Venter also, right? And they announced that we've sequenced the human genome. Well, there was a lot of it they hadn't sequenced because they couldn't, because there's a bunch of repeats in the centromeres and the telomeres in the chromosomes that are just, like ATCG, and when you break those apart, you can't put them together to find out where they go. And so it wasn't until like last year that they finally sequenced all of it. And if you do that and you look at the human genome, you can tell where there's bottlenecks. You can tell where there's constrictions that humans went through and then expanded out. So we've identified like 4 or 5 major bottlenecks. One of them was that everybody out of Africa went through a bottleneck of, like there was maybe a couple hundred or 1,000 people that left East Africa to colonize the globe. That was the bottleneck. There was another one, I think modern humans, but our ancestors were down to like 1,200 individuals left in Africa. We almost went extinct, our ancestors. Anyway, they've identified these bottlenecks. There has never been a bottleneck down to 2 or 8 off a boat. I mean, the fall in terms of science even can be now disproven. And for, 2,000 years or 3,000 years, they've used the fall as an excuse because nobody could disprove it. Well, guess what? When you wade into science with claims that are falsifiable, you run the risk of having problems. So again, it depends on how many rabbit holes you want to go down with their rationalizations.
Thank you. We have a note here from Kurt Mackey. It seems like we need to state that religion is metaphor, not based on observation like science. Does that work? Also, I'd note that Noah's Ark story, hang on, I got to read this. A little long, that Noah's Ark story, I'm sorry guys, Kurt, you're gonna have to make your little notes shorter, that Noah's Ark story was simply lifted from the Epic of Gilgamesh, written more than 1,000 years earlier.
Yes, and again, a lot of people just stop there and say, oh, it's metaphor. Of course, that's what they were doing. It went from the Epic of Gilgamesh through the Babylonians. They revised it and stuff, and we have what we have now. gosh, it just depends on how nasty you want to be with someone. Because
Yeah.
seriously, you can stop there and say, okay, well, yes, thank you very much. Let's, move on and discuss science and other ways and the fact that there was no global flood. But the story of human evolution is an amazing story. Let's talk about that. Or you can say, well, okay, if it's metaphor, what then is it teaching us? What are we supposed to take from it, from just a story? So this loving, all-wise God used genocide because, he made a mistake, even though he knew, because he has foreknowledge, this was all in the plans. And then, when you look at the pictures of Noah's Ark and the flood, and there's all these adults reaching and but God, you got to remember that even if you go to Answers in Genesis, even their site, they will tell you that at the time of flood, there were probably a couple million people living. And we know in civilizations and populations that half of the people back then were children and babies, 1 month olds, 1 week olds. That flood story killed millions of innocent children and babies. They had to. Okay, so what is the rationalization that they will throw back at you? They were not innocent. They were born with original sin. And you go, really? I mean, a 1-day-old baby can have a thought crime even? Anyway, so no, they won't throw that at you. Their apologists will throw out the divine command theory. Do you know what that is? That is that just like an artist who paints something, if he doesn't like the painting, he has the right to destroy it and start over. So since God created all those babies and children, he has the right to destroy them.
Oh, dear.
Here's your comeback. Does he have the right to torment them before he kills them? They have no answer for that. For example, how did he kill the babies and children in the flood? He could have snapped his fingers and taken them up to heaven like Enoch and Elijah, but he didn't. He drowned them. And I had one apologist say, well, drowning isn't that bad. And I said, okay, have somebody hold your head underwater until you lose consciousness, and then get back to me. Okay, but it's not just the flood story. How did he kill David's son? When David, went against God and got Bathsheba pregnant and got her husband killed in a battle on purpose so he could be with her, God decided to punish David by killing the baby. If you read in the Bible, he afflicted the baby with a disease. It says the word afflicted. How long did it take the baby to die? 1 week. He watched while that baby suffered for a week before he finally killed it. So the divine command theory, and by the way, that's not the only session. Besides the flood and David, how did he kill Job's 10 children? He was going to punish Job or test Job, right? He's going to afflict Job with all this stuff. And he decided, I'm going to wipe out Job's 10 children. He did it by crushing them with their own house. So the divine command theory fails if you study your Bible.
Oh, yeah. Oh, John. Okay, question number 3, please, Joy.
The definition of inflation in terms of evolutionary context.
And the question is, with your incredible background and PhDs in physics, can you explain inflation? No, I'm pantomiming you. No, I can't. I have read Ethan Siegel. By the way, it's on my web page. My web page has a bunch of blogs on it. It has 40 blogs and it has a pull-down menu. And I wrote one called The Big Bang and the Multiverse. It's 5 minutes reading, that's all. And I present quotes and stuff especially from Ethan Siegel, who's a physicist and cosmologist. And I don't understand the mathematical equations behind inflation. I do know that it's been tested with various scientific predictions and stuff, and it's holding up. But supposedly, before the Big Bang occurred, there was a moment of incredible expanse, faster than, well, theoretically nothing can go faster than the speed of light, but somehow they figured that out too, that expanded before the Big Bang set off. And I certainly don't understand the mathematics behind that. But if you go to my website and just read about the Big Bang, and it'll give you some of the references if you want to go down and dig down into that. But I'm not qualified for that.
Okay, question number 4. Go ahead.
Yeah. If someone's identity is completely fused with a creationist perspective, are there strategies we can use slowly over time, let's say it's a family member, to help them start to identify with other things, such that if and when they're ready to give up creationism, they have something else to like fill the void?
So the question is, if somebody in your family or a friend has this identity fusion where it's a part of their identity, their particular belief form, are there some things that you can do that will help the communication or the dialogue? Is that?
You see things in their life like, oh, you're a great pickleball player, that's your identity, so that they can not have that be their whole identity anymore.
So pick out things that they may have that are really important, that are also part of their identity. What I've read, and I haven't looked at it recently, but within the last couple of years, I've tried to find articles like, how do you talk with somebody that is this far off to the right or the left? The left is also not completely innocent too. The left has some issues, they're just not quite as many. And I think that what you mentioned is that you basically approach them as a friend. You enjoy spending time with them. They get to learn that you're not out to get them or anything like that, and that you're trying to find things that you have in common. And again, you're gracious and compassionate. But most of the things I read, at the end of the list or discussion, I go, well, as far as my experience is that they don't work. It is really tough. As the quotes I gave you, Lakoff and Fettinger, they don't have any answers either. When somebody is really married into their identity, and they're over 50, and they're a white male, evangelical, I think sometimes you can just say, well, we have to agree to disagree. That our friendship is not worth it to ruin it over that.
Jon, just as a comment to that, I hope people will be patient with me. I have a nephew who I love, but we don't agree on a lot of things surrounding this administration and some of the views that you're expressing. And I just simply said, I love you, and I will not let our differences divide us. And I have to stand my ground. If he starts talking about things that will cause friction between us, his views and mine, I simply don't respond, or I'll change how are the family, but it is so important to me to keep connection with, because human beings being shunned only strengthens them closer to these beliefs. Keeping them connected, you are important to me, but I can't talk to you about this, but tell me about the kids. Tell me about your wife. Tell me about your hunting. And keeping that connection's the key, because those things change over time.
The humanism
Yeah.
in humanism.
Right.
And so I will tell you that I have a family member who's, I don't know how strong a climate denier is, but he will kind of throw out little hints that that's
Yes.
where he's going. And I just asked him one time, he lives out of state, that I said, so you seem to have some doubts that climate change is a human cause. It's interesting, if those of us who watch this slide, so remember climate change wasn't happening,
Yeah.
and then it wasn't human caused.
Yeah.
And well, it is human caused, but it's too expensive to fix.
Yes.
So you kind of watch this transition.
Yes.
But I asked him, I said, well, you seem to have some issues with climate change. I said, what do you think about, let's just really drill down on the data. Because you could be right. I haven't looked at it for a long time. Was it Michael Mann used to be a climate denier, and now he's going to be at the CFI conference, I guess, talking. And and he said no. So he's done some identity fusion. Climate change is very important to him. Conservatism is very important to him. Voting for Trump is very important to him. And so he was not willing to put his views on the table and really look at the data. Remember, I told you, one of those slides, evidence will not matter. They have their beliefs, they have their evidence, but it's bad evidence, but they're oftentimes not willing to really look at really good, verified evidence.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, we've got question number 5, and we are quite a few questions. So I'm going to hold folks to keep their questions short. Go ahead. Question number 5.
Thank you so much for this. It's a very personal thing for me. My parents are about 70 years old, young earth creationists, so this debate is a very active part of my life. I could ask you so many different questions, and I'd love to do that sometime if you're open, but I guess the one I really want to ask is a bit of my mortal fear. It's about this identity fusion and flipping it the other way around. I'm curious if you have any recommendations, or if you get caught up sometimes in a labyrinthine mental chamber of self-checking, and how do you apply this awareness of cognitive dissonance and the knowledge of your attachment as somebody who's been working on this for 50 years? How do you know that you yourself are not entrapped by this identity fusion? And how can we run self-checks as people who are, intrinsically trying to be motivated by evidence and objectivity, to know that we're not also running ourselves into the same issues that keep people stagnant on the other side?
So I think if I can paraphrase that, is that how do we know we're not identity fusion with pro-evolution or pro-climate change or whatever? It's, oh my gosh, it's such a problem right now. It's getting worse. I mean, how do you find references and good sources that are reliable? And so remember that skepticism is not cynicism. It's actually checking things out. And so when I'm looking into creationism or the topics, I will go into their literature as deep as I can to make sure I'm not straw-manning them, that I actually know exactly what they're saying. And sometimes I'll find out, well, actually, that's not a bad argument and stuff, and I'm not going to go there or try and push back against that. My background is in the basic sciences, and what you bring out, what I'm thinking of is that my wife would like to be standing here with a club over my head. What you're saying, stop, debating them. You're not getting anywhere. And so, you mentioned, I think, having parents in their 70s years old that are young earth creationists, and that their identity fusion is really set. I can't imagine anybody converting, when they've got, maybe 10 or 15 years left of their life. So I think I don't have an answer, and I don't think anybody has a really good answer to the world we're in right now, where it's so polarized and nobody believes anybody else's sources. One of the things that has happened is that experts have been run down, right? They just dismiss experts. People have spent, and a lot of it's naivete. They don't even understand what it takes to get a PhD and do postdoc work and do stuff like that. It's just, go look up how long it takes to become a neurosurgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon. It's like, and a lot of times, going for a PhD, your major professor leaves to go to another university and leaves you there, or your experiment fails, and so all the years that you spent doesn't pan out. So it's just like everybody who can get online is now an expert.
Yes.
And so yes. I really don't know how to push back against that, because that's the first thing that people will do will try to ruin your sources.
Right.
Because it's like my PhD is better than your PhD. And then you have to, where do you get into critical thinking, skepticism, and how to do research? The basic things that you get from a college education. You have people now on one side who have never left their small town. Wasn't it Mark Twain or somebody that said travel removes basically a lot of biases and forces you to live with people who have different views. That's what happens in college. You have to accommodate that. And so if you don't go to college, you don't read. I mean, how many Americans stop reading books after high school? The percentage is really high. How many Americans don't have an education past basically the 5th grade in terms of literacy? I don't have an answer to that. It's very frustrating to me. And it's getting worse, it seems like. So I don't know if I answered your question or not. When you find out, I have on my webpage, there's a contact form you can show me. And then in preparing for this presentation, I did come across a Facebook reel that I can share with you if you contact me. And it's a great thing of what you can do as a person in terms of how to be educated, how to be skeptical, how to do, and if we could get everybody to do that, we wouldn't be having these problems. But so I'd love to share that with you. It's a fantastic short reel that he's going into why, I even forget his name, but I have it, why some people who hold certain very conservative views can see what's going on and not realize that they're wrong. And he goes into that, the psychology behind that. And it's basically identity fusion. You cannot get an assault against your bone marrow with that your views can't be wrong. And so anyway.
Just a note, we've got eight more people who would like to ask a question. So John, I'm going to ask you to keep your answers short, and I'm going to ask our audience to keep your questions short. Okay, questioner number 6.
And building up on Hillary and River's questions about identity fusion, is there a scientific basis to hold on hope that people even past their 50s could change their perspective? I'm thinking adopt neurogenesis.
So the question was, is there any literature research of what this identity fusion, especially if you've got somebody over 50, that works maybe to change views and stuff for reality? Not that I've seen. That's one of the most discouraging parts about this, is that I don't know. However, my background is not in psychology, and so I'm really more in the basic science. I want to argue the science with them, and so I'm probably not well qualified to say that, but not that I know of.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't have to repeat questions?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Questioner number 7.
Oh, you already answered mine. It was about trying to argue climate change, so never mind.
Okay. Questioner number 8. Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, he kind of answered mine too.
Okay. Questioner number 9.
Wow.
We're getting through.
All right. Well, I don't think you've answered mine. You mentioned that, if you're over 50 and a creationist and male, what happens if you're over 50 and you're a creationist and female?
They are smarter.
Yeah.
Men, and so they usually are not. They usually don't even go there. It's the males, and so I was hoping somebody would ask me about my take on theistic evolution. What's wrong with theistic evolution as being the answer? And the basic thing is that we know how evolution works. Look at how many offspring have to be born to get even one variant into the next generation that works. How many fish eggs? A tree, an oak tree in the middle of a stable forest that lives for 100 years. How many seeds does that put out? Every year, billions, trillions to get one oak tree to replace it through natural selection. And so when we look at our genome, there's a blog on this. That there about 80 to 90% of our genome is junk DNA, despite what you read. There have been 5 huge, massive extinctions in the world history. So when you look at the history of your DNA, the history of the fossil record, the fact how evolution works, it's incredibly wasteful to get things moving along. So basically, I assert that any God that used or allowed evolution to create the way we find it is incompetent because he couldn't figure out a different way. He's indifferent to all the waste and just incredible suffering and everything. Or he likes all the suffering and stuff and he's malevolent. I mean, look at humans. 80% of the fertilizations, when you form a zygote from sperm and egg, by the time you go out for a child, before modern medicine, 80% death rate. So the evangelicals that are saying that this is a great way to reproduce humans, I would say, well, it's not a great resume that I can see.
Very good. Question number 10.
I was interested in the list of 8, I think 7 or 8 different kinds of Christian nationalists or whatever. My brother, creationists, thank you. My brother, I didn't see the rapture on there. My brother believes in the rapture. I mean, he's an educated man. He's a lawyer. He's can you address that? Because
is he over 50?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a man.
So the rapture is a... No. So he's probably a young earth creationist, I would suspect. Right. Okay. So you could ask him, how did all these species get here? What is your origin narrative? You can ask him.
Well, he believes in the Bible. I mean, what his... the only thing that we do, and I love my brother very much, is exactly what we've discussed here. Agree to not talk about that.
Keep the relationship.
But I'm still gobsmacked. Why wasn't so believing in the rapture does not fall within the creationist. I'm wondering why it wasn't on
the rapture would, because that person is trying to read the Bible literally. So I bet you if you ask him, what is your origin species narrative? How did all these species get here? Because remember that Reason to Believe in Hugh Ross, they've got their multiple extinctions happening in every layer. So there's all kinds of different ways to rationalize it. But the rapture used to be Christopher Hitchens, one of the things that really ground him, because basically those people want World War III. They want nuclear war to kill billions so that, according to their view, Jesus can come back. And they're the lucky ones. You know, they're going to be taken up before this happens. So it's one of the most cruel, incredible things you can think of. But to me, it goes along with the flood narrative. You know, isn't it wonderful that what God did, you know, he gave humanities, and you know, wait a minute, what about all the 1-day-old and the 1-week-old babies and stuff that he drowned, that he had to drown? And they just, as a former evangelical who sat around as a teenager going, yeah, that all makes sense, I can tell you that one of the things you can do is use the Socratic method and just say, well, what about all the, you know, the 1-day-old and the 3-week-old infants and stuff that are going to burn and stuff, you know, are you okay with that? You know, just sometimes you can get them to think a little bit, or they'll get really pissed at you and you just ruin Thanksgiving.
Right. Okay, how about, wait a minute, we're going to have to, question number 11.
It's a comment. This young gentleman here, we need to be humble.
Yes.
You know, and he emphasized that so eloquently. And I go back to my favorite philosopher, which is Mark Twain, when he says, it's not what I don't know that's going to get me in trouble. It's what I'm absolutely sure of that just ain't true. And someday you may even find out all of your research or some of it is wrong. But you've got to be humble enough to accept that, as we all do. So I think his message is profound for all of us. Thanks.
Yeah. I've always thought of your older parent who's dying in the hospital.
Right.
And you don't share their same worldview, and you're at their bedside. Maybe as a physician, I've faced this, and you know, and you look at somebody and they've got different views on an afterlife potential that I do and stuff like that. And so, do you at the you know, the last 2 days of their life, do you say, oh, by the way, everything you believe is wrong, but have a good death anyway?
Yeah.
You know, so.
You
know, there's got to be some grace and some compassion there. And so anyway, there's also a contradiction that the Christian counselors and psychologists, I'm not even going to talk about it. I got somebody very mad at me for asking her to be consistent with her beliefs. And so, why would you not counsel someone if this is what you believe, that child that died in that car accident, that was the will of God. That was a good thing because that's what it says in the Bible, and she about came off the page and said, I would never say that. And I go, well, that's me being, theistic evolution. Is sure that's consistent, or do we want to stop there? And then everybody else is, shut up, Peters. We've got the Catholics on board with evolution. Just shut up. Don't talk about whether it's consistent or not. So, anyway.
Okay, we've got our final question, number 12.
I want to address again the question of how do we know that we don't have this fusion of our beliefs with our, and I think the only way to do that is to be willing to accept new evidence, is to always be willing to question your own beliefs and accept new evidence when new evidence comes along. That's what an empiricist does. They continuously look for new evidence because science is a correcting process. It's not knowledge. It's a way of trying to think about things. And that's what we have to do.
Excellent point. It's just science is not a bunch of facts. No. If you wanted to define science, it's basically a way of not to be fooled.
Yes. It's
double checks, double blind, everything else. And look at evolution is falsifiable. There's multiple ways that it could be wrong. Whoever said that finding a rabbit down in the Devonian area, or when you talk to young Earth creationists who remember, in their view, dinosaurs and humans had to exist at the same time. Flintstones was a documentary. and so what they will do is they will have footprints, they will have drawings in Hindu of what looks like a stegosaurus and stuff like that. But where are the bones?
Yeah.
And so they will always have a rationalization for just about everything. And if you're interested in knowing the comebacks to all the rationalizations, or 85% of them, they're there. And this has really held up well. I started this a couple years ago, and not a lot of links are broken, and the defense of science and evolution seems to be holding up. My whale evolution and my DNA. I wish I had 5 more minutes. Could I have 5 more minutes?
Not today. Sorry.
No. Yeah. There's an emergency repair system in your cell. DNA breaks all the time.
Yes.
There's a quickie. It grabs a piece of DNA, shoves it in the middle, and then it ties off the 2 ends. You can find these ends, and when it puts the patch in and makes a scar, they're different lengths, right? Because it's just grabbing any DNA. We find the exact same scars and DNA repairs in the exact same locations in different species.
Wow.
It is impossible now for them to deny evolution. And if that wasn't enough, by the way, there's 5 of the categories. If that's not enough, some of them are shared and some of them are not. And so when you look at all the great apes, all the way down to mice and dogs, it develops an evolutionary tree that matches the fossil record.
Right. Oh, Jon. Well done.
Okay.
Well done. Well done. You've given us energy to fight the good fight, my friend. Thank you so much.
But decide whether you want to do it or not.
That's right. With humility and kindness. With humility and kindness. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Oh, it was wonderful.